Hi guys, is Jacob Rees-Mogg a hypocrite? Of course he is. Some years ago he voted in the House of Commons against the idea of allowing Parliament to scrutinise post-Brexit trade deals. I had asked at the time if these agreements are so wonderful with countries around the world, surely Brexiteers like Mogg would have no problem allowing Parliament to have a look at them. Recently, Jacob also supported a bill that would allow UK government ministers the ability to ignore international law, ignoring Parliament. Fast forward to this week, where it seems Kier Starmer wants to give government ministers the ability to align the UK with EU standards. The reason given is that it would provide stability for businesses who need to know what standard to follow for export and import. And this could also reduce friction on the border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But Brexiteers aren't happy.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Our bright-eyed and bushy-tailed new Prime Minister, Sir Kier Starmer, made his debut in European diplomacy today, using an international summit at Blenheim Palace to address the continent's most pressing issue of illegal migration, as well as a bit of virtue signalling on climate change and energy policy. However, the Prime Minister always used his platform at the birthplace of Sir Winston Churchill to call for closer ties with the EU. Our famously Brexit-phobic head of government made his case for a, quote, reset post-Brexit, declaring, "Under my leadership, Britain will be a friend and a partner, ready to work with you, not part of the European Union, but very much part of Europe." Arch Remainer Sir Kier is by his own reckoning seeking to distance himself from the previous Conservative government's approach to European relations, such as dismantling the possibility of withdrawing from human rights agreements. However, when considering the vague, non-committal term reset in the context of the Prime Minister's own record on European affairs, while he specifies not part of the European Union, but very much part of Europe, it is clear that he is returning Britain into EU jurisdiction through a combination of stealth and domestic measures. Kier Starmer's historic record as Shadow Brexit Secretary under Jeremy Corbyn, whom he has served but subsequently expelled from the Labour Party, displayed a wish to reverse Brexit. He was even committed to a second referendum. Writing for the Evening Standard during the 2019 general election campaign, he said, "In the first Queen's speech of a Labour government, we will immediately introduce legislation for a referendum to take place. That referendum will take place as soon as possible and no later than 6 months from a Labour government taking office." This may be old hat, but today his newly appointed Minister for European Union Relations, Nick Thomas-Symonds, said Brexit tarnished the UK's global reputation and that the UK is turning inwards when actually Britain should always be turning outwards to the world. And just this week, Starmer took a stealthier approach to bring us back under the European yoke. The Economist's Matthew Holhouse highlighted the explanation of some legislation from yesterday's King's speech, which would allow ministers unilaterally to mirror future EU product standards. Watch out for your smoky bacon crisps. This is partly because of the Windsor Framework, and it already sees this happening in Northern Ireland, where EU law comes into effect automatically. This, in effect, reverses the post-Brexit powers of regulating our own goods for our own consumption, and would allow any future regulation set by the EU, which we have no say in determining, effectively to be adopted by default and with minimal scrutiny. It's further evidence that the blob is still in charge. The scenes from the Commons yesterday of Rishi Sunak and Oliver Dowding laughing away with Sir Kier Starmer and Angela Rayner on the way to hear the King's speech was a visual representation of the minimal difference between the old administration and the new. The Starmer effort simply seeks to enable their progressive leftist agenda further. The British people did not vote to leave the EU so that ministers could streamline EU regulations into statute with minimal scrutiny from elected MPs.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here because this was a pretty long monologue. We come down to the simple fact of being a rule maker versus a rule taker. Let's ignore the hypocrisy here for a moment from Jacob Rees-Mogg. But what is Starmer doing here? And it's interesting that it's been brought up by Brexiteers. It's not really resonating in the media because it's not really a story, but Brexiteers want to make it a story. The idea that ministers would pass legislation immediately to allow the UK to align with EU standards. Now, this hasn't gone through Parliament yet. This is just a thought at the moment. But if it does pass, what would be the advantage of this? The advantage would be that instead of having to wait for new legislation to be put forward, to be voted on and pushed through, where it would be, in a sense, aligning with EU standards, it can be automated, in a sense. It can be streamlined. It can be fast-tracked. The legislation would go through anyway, but the problem Jacob Rees-Mogg and others have is, well, we want to be able to see it. Okay, Jacob Rees-Mogg won't be able to see it. He's no longer an MP, but he wants Brexiteers to be able to see it. But this is about slowing it down. It's not actually about seeing it. It's about slowing it down, trying to stop it, trying to throw obstacles in the way. Now, who would suffer as a consequence of that? Well, businesses would, because businesses who are trying to export into the single market need to be as close as possible to EU standards. If they're far away from EU standards, which Jacob Rees-Mogg and Brexiteers wanted to do, they wanted to diverge from EU standards. They wanted to create more paperwork and more cost. Well, if you align, you reduce the cost and reduce the paperwork. You don't eliminate it because you're outside the single market, but you are reducing the cost and paperwork. This would do that at a time when businesses need stability. They don't want to say, okay, there's a new legislation come out from the EU. What happens in Britain? Well, we're going to have a debate about it in Parliament. We'll try and push something through. No, if ministers are able to do it straight away, then that is faster. It's better for businesses. But this happens all the time. Ministers make decisions. Not everything has to be debated in Parliament. If every decision a minister made had to be debated in Parliament, nothing would be done. Jacob Rees-Mogg knows this. So this will help businesses. Is there a cost? Well, maybe something can go through that Parliament doesn't see and Parliament discovers later. But it comes down to the point of, do you want businesses to grow? Do you want to increase the ability to export into the single market? Do you want to have thriving businesses? Well, if you do, then you want to help them. And creating obstacles doesn't help them. They want stability. They want to know that, okay, as soon as there's a new EU standard that we need to follow it anyway, if we want to export, then it's automated in Parliament. Mogg knows this. He's pretending not to, which is disappointing, because I imagine when he met with business owners before the election, they told him about these problems. They said to him, Jacob, look, we're trying to export our cheese or our food products or whatever into the single market, and we're finding all these obstacles because of Brexit. What did Jacob Rees-Mogg say in response to that? Well, you should just export to Britain. Because another thing that was hidden within this report, not hidden, but he glossed over, was the idea that, well, we can't make a decision here. Well, you can't make a decision because you're not a member of the European Union. How do you be at the decision-taking table? By becoming a member of the European Union. If the UK rejoins, then you get to decide the standard. You're the rule maker, not the rule taker. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.